Welcome back. First of all, let me apologize for the abrupt end of the previous part of this lecture. Screencast only lets me do 15 minutes at a time, and I'd kind of exceeded my time. So let me start back over with remote network access. You may be called upon to provide network access to remote users, and to do this, you want to be sure you understand network address I've got NAT on the brain, Network Access Protection, IEEE 8021X authentication, Radius Server, and Routing and Remote Access Services. NAP, or Network Access Protection, will provide a health policy service for your network. Basically, what this means is that if your clients are trying to log on to your network with their computers, or even with a computer that you own that they've been traveling with, it goes through a service that makes sure that um, the antivirus is up to date, and that your security updates have been allowed, and that the computer is virus free, is malware free, and you can either allow or deny access to your network depending on how this is set up. Um, you can even send the computers to a quarantine area to if they have problems to where they can be fixed before they're allowed to log on to the network. Okay, 802, I'm sorry, IEEE 8021X authentication um, is a mechanism that's used to ensure that devices are authenticated before they're allowed to communicate on your network. Um, when a device connects to your network, it's allowed to communicate only with the authentication server. Then once it's authenticated, then it can get out to the rest of your network. A radius server is a remote authentication dial-in user service. Well, naturally we don't use much dial-up anymore, but that's where it originated. But today we use it for authentication of VPN traffic and also for wireless clients. Um, it can also be a component included with your network policy and access services role. Now, wow, I got my tongue wrapped around that one, didn't I? Routing and Remote Access Services provides both VPN server functionality and dial-up access to your network. As a VPN server, it allows clients to connect across the internet or from another network and establish secured and encrypted communications called tunneling um, for your users to be able to connect to your network. Now, you may need to add more roles, and if you do, here are some of the roles that can be added, and those are Active Directory Certificate Services, which provides digital certificates for your users that they can be used for authentication and encryption processes. Active Directory Domain Services, and this role provides Active Directory services to the network with which the server and the group provisioning as well as computer management can be done. Um, there's Active Directory Federation Services, and this allows for two different authentication realms to share credentials so that users can use a single sign-on procedure. Um, and that way they're not required to log on individually to each network. Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services is a minimal version of Active Directory, and it's used when Active Directory is not your primary network directory service. And then there's Active Directory Rights Management Services, which is used to control access to and distribution of digital assets such as documents and media. The assets are signed and secured so that only the authorized users can access them. It can also restrict, whether or not the user can print, can copy, or even forward the documents on to somebody else. Another service that you would be interested in would be DHCP, which provides dynamic configuration of IP addresses, DNS, which is your domain name server role, and this resolves domain names to IP addresses, fax server, which can be used for sending and receiving faxes, Hyper-V, which is Microsoft Server Virtualization. Remote desktop services will allow for remote access of the desktop of the Windows Server through, from say from your client desktop or your workstation. You can use remote desktop to log on and manage your servers. And Windows deployment services are used so that you can install operating systems across a network to machines that either need to be re-imaged or don't have an operating system at all. And then there's also Windows Server Update Services. I always refer to it as WSUS, which allows you to control the Microsoft or Windows updates by downloading them to your own servers on your own network and then deciding which updates you're going to deploy to your clients. But of course, you're going to take the time beforehand to test everything, because it is notorious as soon as you don't test something that Windows Update will break something that you needed to be running on your network. Okay, let's talk about Windows Server features. Windows comes in both the GUI and command line interfaces, or you can use the command line even on a computer that is mainly a GUI computer. And if once you get used to it, you find out that the command line is really a lot faster. Um, you also have full networking capabilities and a good set of management interfaces. Um, with Server Core, you also, it is just command line, so don't forget that, and we will be working with that. There's, on all the servers that are not Server Core, you have, a start menu, a taskbar. It looks kind of like a Windows desktop, and you can, use that GUI interface and your mouse to navigate around. Remember that the command line is very, very old, and it was with us even before we had Windows operating systems, and it was referred to as DOS, or Disk Operating System. A lot of people still use DOS as the term. I still use DOS sometimes. Some people say command prompt, some people say command line or command line interface, or you'll even hear CLI a good bit, because computer geeks like to use, little make, little words, or use initials for everything. And then there's also a new feature called the PowerShell that can be used, and it is it's a little bit different than the command prompt. It's very new as far as Windows features goes, and it also contains little commandlets that you can use. Okay, networking features. Let's talk about those. We know that the internet exploded from the 1990s forward. So some of the features that we need is the TCP/IP protocol suite. We're going to use, that's the basis for providing network services. And built right into the operating system is the ability to offer file sharing and printer sharing and network authentication and web serving and media streaming and network-based operating system deployments, network-based operating system updates, network configuration and resolution services, centralized fax services, data caching services. Here we're talking about branch cache, and then remote line command line services such as Telnet. Now I'm going to tell you, Telnet is very insecure in that everything is transmitted in plain text, so we really don't use Telnet anymore at all. And also we can use group policy to provide centralized management of our client computers across the network by determining through group policy what we're going to allow or how we're going to configure computers to behave on our network. We can even restrict applications from running. Okay, when it comes to managing your servers, you have options. You can use Server Manager and Control Panel in the GUI interface. You can also find the administrative tools, and you'll find the server manager inside the administrative tools from your start menu. It's the primary server manager is your primary GUI tool for managing your servers, and you can look at it when you finish getting your servers built, um, and look at, because this is where you go to manage your roles and features, and it's also used for diagnostics and troubleshooting. So you can go from there, from server manager to event viewer, and look at your performance and your device manager, and you can even schedule tasks through the server manager. The PowerShell will give you a modern text mode interface to the operating system, and it has features beyond the traditional command line or command prompt interface. It has improved scripting capabilities and object-based commands, which are just sort of like little groups of commands. Commandlets um, are available, and then also consistency of commands, because all the commands use a verb noun constructs such as get, process, or set time. Um, Keep in mind again that the command prompt is the oldest Microsoft interface, and we still use it today. I know that it can be frustrating. I know that it can be difficult to learn, but you really need to learn it. And we are going to have several sessions where we're going to use command line interfaces. Let's talk about Windows Server Editions. Um, There's Foundation Server, which is a low-cost entry-level version of Windows servers. Microsoft recommends it for small businesses only. It supports the basic server roles such as Active Directory Domain Services, Application Server, DHCP Server, DNS Server, Print and Document Services, and Web Services. And it includes partial support for file services, in that you can use one DFS root. Then there's Server 2008 R2 Standard. The Standard Edition is the most common edition that's going to be used in both small and medium-sized businesses, because it offers the majority of the features that an organization requires. The key difference between Foundation and Standard is that Standard supports Hyper-V and Foundation does not. Then there's the Enterprise version, and this is the first level in which all the server roles are completely supported, and it's used for medium and large organizations. Um, the Enterprise Edition allows you to run 4 virtualized editions of server with Hyper-V without having to pay for any additional licenses. Data Center Edition is a special edition that comes usually only on pre-tested software. It's not supported on just any computer. You can't just install it on anything you want to install it on. Instead, you buy tested hardware that has a pre-configured installation of Data Center. In most cases, the Data Center Edition is an OEM install, which means it comes installed on the hardware when you buy it. Then Windows Web Server is intended to be just what it means. It's a web server. It supports DNS server and web server roles, and is streamlined for the Windows Server 2008 for delivery of web pages and web hosting services. HPC Server, or High Performance Computing Edition, is focused on performance. It supports significantly fewer roles than Server or Standard Edition does, and it's intended to run in a clustered configuration. Then there's Windows Server for Itanium, and uh, it is still available, but it has very limited functionality. You can install the application server role and the web services role, but really no other roles are available under the Itanium based systems. Okay, now that's pretty much the end of this chapter, but don't forget that we will be using command prompt on here. I'm showing you this activity here. You can ignore this activity because we do have, I've given you directions in Dropbox, so do not follow the directions in this activity that I neglected to remove from my PowerPoint. Okay, That's the end of Chapter 1. I hope you've taken the time to listen to this and be ready to take your test anytime next week. Talk to you later.